Full send.
Indeed, full send into another episode of the Lotcast. Trey, Alec, and Essad with you this week to talk about stuff with NC State so far that's been going on. Let's just yeah, let's uh let's just dive right into the men's basketball. I know we've had a couple of pretty frank discussions about men's basketball. Now let's have a Kevin discussion. See what I did there? Because men's basketball got a win over Miami on what night was that? Tuesday night, and gets out of their little losing skid and stays where they kind of were in the ACC a little bit. But it's not going to get any easier for them, that's for sure. So, what are your thoughts on the win?
And that's about it. No, it's a quality win. It's a Q2 win, which is it's good. Yeah. You gotta protect home court. But I'm not sure how much you can put into that win because Miami is so injury depleted that they were only down to, I think, 2 of their regular starters, and they have guys playing big minutes that were not expected to be playing big minutes this season, or at least at this part of this season. And Nigel Pack is a baller, and they, to their credit, the guy almost single-handedly ripped the game away and won the game for them. So they did adjust defensively down the stretch to at least tamp down what he was doing, and people got some free chicken out of it that he missed 2 clutch free throws right near the end. So that was very helpful for the Pack. But I was a bit confused when they talk about Nigel Pack, but they're playing the Wolfpack. But no, it's a decent win. But given the remaining schedule and the up and down nature that they continue to show on the offensive end, it's going to be tough sledding for them the rest of the way.
On one hand, that's a Miami team that went to the Final Four last year, but on the other hand, like you said, not the Miami team that went to the Final Four last year. And I think I said to somebody, these are two teams that are in free fall a little bit, and it's which team ever would free fall harder was going to lose the game. So
yeah, he said that in the postgame. They thought that State played like a team that was desperate, and they needed to. They played with some desperation, and I thought they played well in the game. I thought Miami played poorly. They missed like 6 layups, and they had like 18 turnovers. Like they were kind of a mess.
Yeah.
State had good energy, which is something you like to see coming off of a cluster like that Syracuse game. I don't think that there's a whole lot that's going to change some of the flaws of this team, but I did like Michael O'Connell. I think he's done a really good job in certain situations for State. I think he had a good number of assists last night again. State actually had 17 assists on 26 baskets last night. They can run offense most of the time. In some spurts, I mean, it's helpful when they get a hedging defense more. Something I wrote about today is the numbers when they're covered, when their pick and roll is facing a hedge or some form of aggressive ball screen defense. The shooting numbers and assist numbers are just way higher. And that's what Miami did most of the game. And State had a lot of success attacking it. They actually shot the ball pretty well in the game. They made a number of threes that they cracked open the defense a little bit with some swing pat or some not swing passes, that's a football term, skip passes, that was the word I was looking for. Yeah, so O'Connell's is a player that I think should be on the floor more in those situations if teams are going to continue to cover you that way. It was really nice to see Casey and Jaden Taylor knock down some threes. They got some open looks as a beneficiary of O'Connell and that offense, and it's still a good defensive team. Miami's not very good, I don't think. I don't know that State is particularly good either, but this is still a team that's going to win some games the rest of the way. But they're going to have to beat some teams that are going to create mismatches, and we'll see if they can do that. But yeah, it's still an uphill climb, but if they had lost that game, it would have probably been curtains. So
Yeah.
it's
Mhm.
nice to just get back in the win column.
Well, and it doesn't help too that the next team that NC State faces is a Georgia Tech team that is on their way to being North Carolina state champions at this particular rate. And I know we've probably all seen this stat so far, but this is from Jeff Borzello. He says that Georgia Tech coach Damon Stoudemire is just the third first-year ACC head coach in the last 30 seasons to beat both Duke and UNC. The other two, Sidney Lowe and Kevin Keats. So that's kind of an odd stat, but that's the next opponent for NC State, and they've got a former NC State player on their roster too for Georgia Tech, who actually had the game-winning stop. So
Yeah.
The one thing that makes me optimistic about the Georgia Tech game, looking at the way that they've played this year, is that I don't think State is good enough to lose to Georgia Tech, if that makes sense.
yeah, but
It's a very
does
Jekyll and
Georgia Tech
Hyde
team
story.
that beat Duke and UNC?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
They're beating good teams and losing to bad teams, so we got this one covered. No, I mean, a lot of it just depends on. It's the big storyline for me is I keep going back to it is how are these teams gonna cover State? I wrote about this on the website today. Like State's shooting 38.6% from three against defenses that are hedging ball screens. That's good enough for 17th in the country. If that
Mhm.
was their percentage for the whole season, that's excellent to shoot as a team over 38%. All right, against teams that are playing drop coverage, they're shooting 10.8% from three. It's a completely different dynamic, and I'm honestly, like, shocked that more teams haven't tried to drop cover State. I think
Hmm.
the film from the Wake game where, DJ Horne absolutely exploded in the mid-range and shredded Wake's defense spooked a lot of people, but State moves the ball well and is able to get good shots through Michael O'Connell when you get a hedging defense because you have to rotate a lot more, and you rotate off of shooters, right, to tag rollers, and O'Connell's really good at finding those guys and
Mhm.
anticipating things and making teams pay for slow rotations. Right? When you get the drop coverage, you don't get any rotations really. Especially, it's even easier when you talk about running those sets with Burns as the roll man. It's just forced. They get a lot of mid range shots forced, which is the goal. And State's really been bad with that, except for one game. But they've been able to get good shots for their shooters, and they do have shooters. When teams defend like Miami did last night. So I haven't watched Georgia Tech. I'll be really fascinated to see what they come out with there. And how, if it is drop, how can State, score because this team does defend, and I don't think it takes more than 70 points to win a game like this.
So that leads me to an interesting question then, because you mentioned it when State beat Virginia that you were kind of shocked at what Tony Bennett did defensively in that game. So let's go back to that UVA game for a second, the second one. What did UVA do differently in the second game that didn't work for State?
They got I believe Jordan Minor did not play in the first Virginia game, and it
Mhm.
created some issues with matching up with DJ Burns. I'm gonna check that because I might be mistaken on who that was, but they were able to not double Burns. So this has nothing to do with the pick and roll, obviously, but it changed a lot for Virginia because not doubling Burns puts a huge onus on him to score, and he really hasn't been that good this year. Virginia didn't do anything structurally different guarding the pick and roll against State the second time around. I just thought they were a lot more glued together defensively, and State just played poorly. Sometimes you
Mhm.
just play poorly. So it wasn't just from a high level strategy perspective. It wasn't a hugely different effort. But you're right. That was the only team that really hedged ball screens for State that really locked them down. State's been able to score the basketball against every other team that's done that. So it is to me like that. I mean, that's basically what every team has done is one of those two. The only teams that have really mixed it up were Boston College and Syracuse. Kind of mixed up their coverages a little bit, and State shot the ball pretty well against Boston College and not so well against Syracuse. And there's obviously other factors there, but that's a storyline to pay attention to for sure.
Yeah, and I think that one thing that DJ Horn was doing last night that he ought to have been doing against Virginia every time they hedged the screen is he was really sort of trying to generate contact there and then get them into foul trouble and go to the free throw line. So we got I think Miami into foul trouble relatively early in the second half, and that really helped, because that's going to be the story of the game. I think every night, if people are going to be hedging screens like that, you want to do what you can to generate contact there, and if you have to sell it a little bit, then sell it. But I know that a lot of the UNC fans were mad last night about them not getting the benefit of the whistle, which is funny that like I don't know what the stat is, but they shot an equal number of free throws to Georgia Tech, and I don't know when the last time they've shot equal or less free throws against an ACC opponent, because that almost never happens for them. But I mean, they were uncharacteristically bad from the free throw line for them. But I'm relatively confident playing against Georgia Tech. I don't think it works out to their benefit that it's a road game. If we were playing in Atlanta, I'd be maybe a little bit more worried. They have an underrated home crowd, but
Mm-hmm.
I think you're right about you just generally State needs to be more aggressive against hedging defenses,
mhm.
particularly when O'Connell does not have the ball. O'Connell does a lot of things well and handles that situation well, but I don't know if the other guards have. But one thing I did see Horn do last night is he hit a couple of pocket passes to Middlebrooks, which
Mhm.
that's kind of like the classic old-fashioned way to beat a hedge, right? Is basically you're passing the ball between the two players to a wide open slipping big, and it's something that State has not done a lot this year. We haven't seen any guards really try and split the hedge, which is something you can do if a team leaves you a little too much space there. There's a lot of ways you can really make them pay for that, but you have to be aggressive. And I think that's a really good point. Is State really hasn't been aggressive enough offensively because that's just not really
Mhm.
the kind of guards that we have. But they've still managed to score. So we'll see.
And I think a big change, and something that we've talked about before, is getting good looks from three versus taking a rushed shot makes like all the difference in the world, because getting the ball in rhythm to Jaden Taylor versus him trying to take a guy off the dribble and hit a 3-pointer are two totally different looking jump shots. So when he got the ball from O'Connell and he was able to step into the shot, it looked like like a very confident shot, and you could tell the ball was going to go in as soon as he let it go. So things like that are the benefit of having a guy like O'Connell, because he's looking all over the floor for people. I think he earned being in the starting lineup. I hope that continues. It was an interesting 4 guard, 1 big lineup for the majority of the game. I don't know if they're going to be able to continue that against everyone else down the stretch, but I do like that Kevin Keats was at least trying to tinker with the lineups and not just sticking with things because it clearly wasn't working before. And DJ Burns' minutes continue to go down, and I think that's ultimately for the best, probably because Diarra's impact on the game, even if he's not scoring, it continues to make his presence felt whenever he's on the floor.
All right, it's a fascinating discussion of Burns versus the other bigs. I don't know that I have a strong opinion either way of the minutes and how they should lay out with those, but it's very interesting situation basically because you have two guys that move really well. Particularly Diarra is an elite defender. Middlebrooks can hold his own. They both move well. Neither is particularly skilled offensively, but they help you attack defenses in the pick and roll more because of their ability to move. Right? When Burns is on the floor, you kind of lose that. He's not particularly great roller, and his function is really essentially like playing inside out point guard. Right? They feed him the ball in the short corner, and if he's doubled, he passes. If he doesn't, he goes and tries to score, and that's fine if he's going to make those shots. But he really hasn't been making those shots.
Yeah, he's been in a
Uh,
slump.
he really has, yeah. And so it's kind of that same discussion we had, last year about Terquavion Smith as like an offensive initiator when he was in a big slump. Is do you adjust the lineup because of that, or do you let a guy who can do those things green light it until he gets his rhythm back? It's a tougher decision for a coach. I think a lot of people are just like, oh, he's missing shots. He ain't come out of the game. But like that's not really how it works. you still need to instill confidence in the players, and so it's an interesting. Like I don't have like a great opinion. Like I'm not dogmatic about this at all. Like I don't really know what the answer is on how you distribute those minutes, but be interested to see what they do.
I mean, he's still shooting, just over 50% from the field for the season, even being down for a few games. So, it just shows how efficient he normally has been from the field. I think that he just hasn't been getting as clean looks as he has been, and I don't know if there's something physical that's maybe happening behind the scenes that we haven't been known. Maybe he's trying to play through something. He just seems like he's a step slower than he has been.
Yeah, I wonder if it started before the Virginia Tech game or after. But the game where he was vomiting, I feel like he hasn't been the same player since then either.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, that's no fun. Vomiting's no fun.
Yeah, but it really seems like if teams know that he's the lone rim protector, they're doing what they ought to do, and like you could see it, like Nigel Pack, if he sees DJs down there, he's not settling for the jump shot, and he's going like right in to try and initiate contact, and 9 times out of 10 Burns is going to foul. He, even at this stage in his career, he's not learned to not foul in those situations, or just do what he can to try and avoid contact. You don't want to give up the shot like he did last night. I don't remember who had it, but it was like a clear run to the rim, and he got in front of the guy and just fouled him instead of. And I think and it was an and one, so he gave up the foul with the foul shot, and at least if you're gonna hit the guy, make him not make the shot as well.
If you're gonna foul him hard.
Well, yeah. Yeah. Well, state basketball gets back in action against Georgia Tech, but the women's team, boy, do they have a big stretch coming up here. They've got them on Thursday night, then they've got Louisville, and then they've got Virginia Tech, which are right now pretty much the 3 best teams in the ACC outside of NC State. So this is going to be a pivotal week for the Pac women, and we've already seen the back and forth from Westmore a little bit. This is going to be a big game on Thursday night.
This is going to be electric. This is going to be the best NC State basketball atmosphere probably in years, because there was a game a couple of years ago when UNC was just starting to get good and State was, I think, in the top 5, where it was pretty anticipated. I think this one's on that level. That was the one where Courtney Banghart was saying dumb crap before the game. That was the first time she did that. But yeah, this is gonna be heated, and I'm happy that State is at full strength, because they've missed time this year for Sanaya and for River Baldwin, and those are both really, really, really critical pieces. Arguably the 2 most critical pieces for this team. The Baldwin injury was scary, so getting her back is a big, big deal, and I feel really good about this stretch. You have to go through Liz Kitley, which is never great, but with River in the lineup, that changes things from what we saw in that first game. I think that they can guard Virginia Tech and pretty much anybody on the perimeter, because State's guards are so athletic and so dynamic. So you're not going to win every game. I wouldn't be surprised if they drop one of these, but if they come out of the stretch 2-1, I think I would be happy with it. And I think if they come out of it 3-0, they should be ranked number 2 in the country, probably, because this is 3 really good basketball teams. There, I'm just gonna say it is. I hate UNC, but they are good. They are good. They're a good team. So it'll be an intense week for sure.
Yeah, I think that those that the little Jim comment is going to live like in infamy every time she comes to Raleigh, and I love to see it.
Yeah, I think it's also an important stretch. You mentioned, Alec, not just for the sake of State, trying to get through this and stay at the top of the ACC, but I think, and I know nobody really should be paying attention to bracketology, because none of it makes any sense or matters at all. But those the ESPN guys, I should say. But they have State right on the edge of a 1 seed already right now, even though they're 5th in the country. Still, let me rephrase that. You've got NC State flirting with a 1 seed again. So this is a big week for NC State.
They're not only fifth in the country, they're fifth in the ACC right now, which is crazy to think about. That based on the way the standings are breaking out, obviously, all the teams that are kind of jammed up near the top are all going to be playing each other. It'll all shake out like it always does. It's interesting, but I mean, it's good to know that they are at least getting credit for being as good as they have been, and people are really acknowledging what their potential is now. And the key stretch here, yeah, these ranked opponents that they have coming up on the schedule, if they can get through, Alec, like you said, they had 3 ranked opponents in a row. So, you'd probably be more worried about Louisville than Carolina, but you never know what's going to happen with Carolina, and always kind of a wild card. Um, if they can get those first 2 and then stay strong, in the last handful of games, one seed should, if you're speaking really highly of your team, if at the worst they're going to be a 2 seed in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah. Well, and if you think about it too, if they did have River Baldwin for that first Virginia Tech game, I think they win that game easily.
Oh yeah, they would.
They really do.
They almost won it right as it was.
Yeah.
They should have won it.
So,
and, that was an illegal screen, but I understand they're never going to call that. I can accept that, but it was not a legal screen. But yeah, that's beside the point. But this will be the defining stretch of the season, and I'm just, I think that this is a roster that really is put together very, very well. It's got kind of everything that you could want. With your combination of attacking guards and floor spacing and ability to stretch. Mimi Collins is shooting 43% from 3. That's pretty impressive. She's pretty much a true big, right? I mean, she's basically a stretch 4, and that's a huge thing to have, right? Because you can run. That's the thing I like about Wes Moore is he runs offense on offense on offense. They have so much stuff to run, and they can do that because of the personnel that they have, right? You can isolate Sanaya Rivers, you can isolate Isaiah James, right? You can run your standard pick and roll stuff with Baldwin or Collins, and really either James or Rivers, and that's a really scary set right there. Right? And then you have Madison Hayes is a 45% 3-point shooter, which is I haven't looked at any of this data, but that has to be top 10 in the country. I mean, she's an elite floor spacer. That's a huge problem for teams. We saw there's a lot of plays this year where you see we talked about hedging ball screens, with the men's team. It's really hard to do with the women's basketball team for state because you can't really leave Madison Hayes. You have to come off of the short corner, right, to tag the roller, right? You have to get back there in a hurry. And Sanaya Rivers is a good passer. I don't know if she was a true point guard when she first came into college. I don't really remember what kind of her role was going into her first year in South Carolina, but she is now. She's a good passer. She sees the floor well. And State's done a really good job attacking basically everything that comes their way, and they have an answer for all of it because there's such a diverse lineup that can win games in so many diverse ways. And I think it's just awesome to watch that offense roll because they do everything, right? They play through the high post, right? They play through horns all the time. You get a lot of standard ball screen stuff. You get a lot of back screen stuff that's designed for the bigs. They ran the same play 3 or 4 times against Duke, where they just came into horns and ran a double back screen for Baldwin, and she was just wide open under the basket because Duke just got lost in rotation. Like the play calling is so deep for Wes Moore. Like he is really fun. His teams are really fun to watch.
And I feel bad now, like not being sure what we had going into the season, and it was a lot of transfers coming in. You never know, and it's sort of a mixed bag with people you're not familiar with, and don't question Wes Moore, basically. And it seemed like it was going to be a transition year or a rebuilding year. They had a lot of highly touted pieces, but I wasn't sure whether it was going to come together. It's obviously come together much better than I anticipated, much quicker than I anticipated.
It's a fantastic contrast. Everybody loves to talk about coaching this and coaching that, and certainly Wes Moore is, I think, an elite, top of the elite women's basketball coach. But just from take away the coaching perspective for a second and just look at lineups and how they match up with other teams. It's really a very useful comparison to look at the men's guard lineup versus the women's guard lineup and what these teams have. As Isaiah James and Sinai Rivers are excellent athletes, right? They will take anybody off the dribble. They can do that, right? They can break down a defense off the dribble. And Isaiah James, she's been hot and cold as a shooter, but right now she's on. And when she's on, she's basically unguardable, right? Because it's hard to stay with her, right? But you can't be a step behind, right? You can't be a step short. You can't be giving her any amount of cushion, right? Because she's going to make a three, right? So you can run so many different actions with that they can attack. There was a play that stood out to me in the Duke game. I think it was just a standard. I want to say it was just a standard pick and roll play, and you got a hedge, and you got what's called shake pick and roll, which is the two guard rising back toward the ball as the pick and roll initiates, and that's usually the player where the tagger is rolling off of to pick up the rolling big. And State, Rivers made a great pass, the right read to James, but Duke pretty much had it covered. They rotated pretty well, but because James can shoot and attack, one pump fake, you got a really hard closeout. The Duke defender's in the air. She runs right by him and she scores. If you flip that into a one-tool player, all right, you don't have to worry about that. A hard closeout on a person who can just shoot but can't really attack the rim, right? That player is going to get shut down by help at the basket, right? If you have someone who can't shoot, a soft closeout, that play dies right there. It's versatility in the guards, and that's something State is loaded with on the women's side, and it's lacking on the men's side. And that's from a personnel perspective, a huge point I've been making about the men's team, that you really notice the difference when you watch the women's team. And I'm comparing these two because I don't watch a lot of college basketball that isn't NC State anymore. So these are like my frames of reference, is these two teams. But it is worthwhile to just look at the mismatches that State creates on the perimeter with Sinai Rivers and Isaiah James.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it really seems like Westmore was trying to stay ahead of the game with evolving his offense year over year. And if you look at the way the offense played 2 to 3 years ago, this is a lot more fast paced, there's a lot more high intensity, I think, in terms of the number of options that they have, less traditional sets running everything through the big like you did before, and putting everything in the hands of your playmaking guards is the way to go, and it provides the offense so many more options. And not only that, they're a phenomenal free throw shooting team. They have 7 people on the team that are shooting 72% or higher from the free throw line, and so it's amazing.
Yeah, it's a versatility thing that really allows them to redesign the offense as needed, based on the opponent. So we've seen them play through River, when they have a big size advantage. I think Florida State was an example of that. The game she got hurt in, she was like 10 for 12 from the field before she got hurt, and they were just feeding her in the post. And they can win games other ways too. And what's impressive is how well they execute their incredible depth of sets that they run. You don't always see that with teams. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of versatility with the lineup. And yeah, when Kunane was on the floor, they played through the post a lot more. They
Right.
still do, but I think you really have elite creation guards now, and that's just like candy for a coach. Like it's awesome. You can do so much with that. It's so fun to watch when you have truly dynamic ball handlers on a team.
And you're not living and dying on one individual person game to game. There's obviously you've got Sinai Rivers and Isaiah James, but they aren't the ones that they're not the equivalent of somebody like Terquavion Smith, where like you need all of the points that he was going to give you in order to have a chance to win that game.
They got 5 players that average double figures, right?
Yeah,
Pretty good. You guys remember
Is that good?
Yeah.
The TJ Warren basketball teams where we averaged 71 points per game as a team, and he averaged 73 points per game. Yeah, I don't miss that style of that.
Yeah. In two different shooters shooting 43% or higher, from the 3-point line, that's the metrics are all in their favor. It's this is how you construct a modern offensively focused basketball team that is also really good defensively. So if they get a number one seed, it'll be well earned.
Yeah, and I think it begs an interesting question, because I was talking to somebody about the men's side and how I really felt like, compared to years past, there really are 3 or 4 runaway teams on the men's side that could end up being in the Final Four. UConn, Houston, Kentucky. Not going to name the fourth one. You know who I'm talking about. But UConn, Houston, Kentucky, that are kind of runaway. These are Final Four contending teams. I don't feel that way on the women's side. I feel like NC State is in a position where they can make it to the Final Four this year, because outside of South Carolina, it seems like there's 6 or 7 teams that can get to the Final Four, 8 or 9 even.
I love how UNC on this podcast is like Voldemort from Harry Potter. Who must not be
They
named.
who shall not be named.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think there's a scene. I haven't seen Harry Potter in years, but there's a scene where I think Dumbledore says it's okay to say his name, and not saying his name gives him strength through fear. Like I think we can do that. Like let's not make them worse than they are. They are the University of North Carolina, and they are who they are. And there's a lot of growing parity in women's basketball, and I think that's a sign of the development of the sport. Women's basketball as a whole is not that old of a sport, and UConn won like 100 billion games in a row. Like it was almost comical. Like the growing parity is a sign of more programs investing in it, more programs having more resources trickling down throughout the entire ecosystem of women's basketball, producing more and more good players, and it's awesome. State is not a team that was good during the time where a team could roll to 40-0, win every game by 60 points, and it's gotten more and more and more competitive in the ACC. But that's not because State has like slipped back or anything. It's because a lot of these other teams are getting better and better, and the ACC is a very strong conference in women's basketball.
Yeah, and I know we say it too. With the addition of Stanford, Cal, and SMU coming to the ACC, think about women's basketball. Stanford has the all-time winningest basketball coach, period. So the ACC is going to get even better with women's basketball when they add Stanford next year.
Yeah, they should include that in the TV deal, because the increased matchups we're going to get are going to be really, really fun to watch. I mean even you've got South Carolina and Stanford that are your typical people you're going to see in the top 5, and what's the main shooter on Iowa? Caitlin Clark. Thank you. I was just watching some of her videos this morning. I should have remembered. She's one of those shooters that makes me jealous. I wish I had her jump shot. If you're gonna pick one team that might make a deep run, that's one of the ones. But I'm not sure whether Iowa has the staying power after she leaves. She's definitely gonna go pro after this year. So I think there's a number of new faces in the top 10 that kind of haven't been there, with UConn slipping down. I know Paige Beckers has been hurt, so they've kind of slipped a bit since kind of NC State kind of broke them a little bit early on in the season. I mean, they're still kind of hovering around. They're 11th now, but it's good for the sport that somebody like Louisville, that was there consistently for the last few years, has dropped down.
Yeah.
But still, the ACC has 4 ranked teams. So if you include Stanford next year, that's 5. It's the future is still looking really, really bright for women's basketball in the ACC.
And I think in addition to that, you're mentioning a team that's been rising through the rankings of women's basketball. Just look at Virginia Tech.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right? Virginia Tech was not a program that people considered a contender in women's basketball, and they just won the ACC last year. So there's that parity in that
And on the
one.
men's side. And on the men's side.
They won both?
The year before last, didn't they?
I've barely been paying attention these last couple of years to men's basketball.
It was 2 years ago. Yeah. They did.
Yeah. It kind of shows how much we haven't seen success under Kevin Keats. That in the time that he's been here, Georgia Tech with Josh Pastner and Virginia Tech have with a relatively new coach have won the ACC championship.
By the way, shout out to ACC for sticking with the tradition on the women's side and keeping that tournament in Greensboro. That's where it should be every year on the men's side too.
I love the Josh Pastner ACC title. It's one of my favorite ACC titles ever because they literally didn't play a semifinal game.
Yeah.
They literally didn't even play the game. So it was like, and Florida State that year, who they beat in this is a tangent, but that team was so overrated. And I think Virginia would have cracked Georgia Tech that year. But the Virginia Tech one is an interesting one for sure. Yeah, I mean, it goes to show like anything can happen. It's a high variability sport.
Well, and speaking of anything can happen, NC State's football schedule came out a couple weeks ago, and we haven't had the chance to talk about that yet. But let's just say it's front heavy. NC State's football schedule in 2024. The Wolfpack will open up on a Thursday, August 29th. I'm actually going to pull it up here so I don't say anything wrong. But they will open it up on a Thursday, August 29th, against Western Carolina, which I am glad that game is first and not the one that follows because, yeah. But let me see here. I'm pulling it up. NC State football schedule. All right, so Western Carolina on August 29th. Then September 7th, they play in the Duke's Mayo Classic against Tennessee. Then Louisiana Tech. And then they go to Clemson. So that's the front-heavy portion we were talking about. And then, I have to say, in my opinion, after that, the hardest games that are left are October 12th against Syracuse, November 9th against Duke, and then November 21st at Georgia Tech. So kind of go through your thoughts on the football schedule a little bit. And it's very weird to see Stanford and Cal on there as a conference game. But just kind of go through your thoughts on that a little bit.
I'm glad that they have a hard game before Clemson, which is essentially an exhibition game. Especially, if you want to buy into the hype and say the state has a chance to be in the 12-team playoff, that's a game that if you lose is not the end of the world. If you believe that this is a team that has that potential, and it's something that I think benefited them the last two times they played a really big game against Clemson. In 2021 they no-showed at Mississippi State. But I think they got better from that, right? And they went through a lot of adversity in that Clemson game, and they found a way to win. And then, they had a decent Texas Tech team. They went on the road in a marginally difficult environment against ECU and played horribly. But those are things I think that you learn from. And they went down to Clemson that year. They didn't win, but they played well, and they showed up to the game. They didn't fart the game away. So I think it's good to have a really difficult game because then the build up becomes something that's already happened, right? When you get to that second Clemson game, right, the build up to the big game, right, that's already happened now. You've already done that with Tennessee, so I think it becomes more routine, right? You lose a little bit of the deer in the headlights anxiety type stuff that can happen sometimes with those types of games, and the Clemson game matters a heck of a lot more than the Tennessee game. And then after that, there's a lot. There's not like it's not loaded with terrible teams, but it's also most certainly not loaded with great teams. So there's that Clemson game is a huge deal because there's a lot for the taking.
Yeah, and I can't see. Obviously it's January, and we a lot of things can change as the season goes on. But outside of Tennessee and Clemson, there's not a team that jumps out where State is not going to be favored in those games, at least. So it really shows that they saw what the schedule was going to be and made the push that they did with the lineups to make sure that they could go as much as all in as they could. But I think it really goes to show how adding in these new teams has watered down the overall strength of schedule across the board in the ACC. Because I think that's going to be, in my prediction, that's going to be the major talking point nationally when people talk about the ACC, is going to be the overall weakness of the schedule compared to other conference. And it's like a snake eating its tail kind of thing, that the SEC says they're filled with the great teams because they're all playing each other, and there's still good football to be had in the ACC, but I think that spreading out the really good teams amongst an even broader set of total teams, it really limits the opportunities to have really high quality wins. So it's good that State is going to continue. I think in this model, a lot of people were hoping to avoid Clemson, but I think it's probably good in this model. They're going to continue to play Clemson every year, so they could at least hang their hat on having the opportunity to play one. Because there's, I was reading an article that was talking about the overall weakest schedules, the top 10, and half the list was ACC teams, including UNC and NC State. So it's like it's something that a lot of people are going to be talking about a lot, and all you can do is win. You win the games in front of you, and that's the argument that Clemson has used in the past when they've made an argument for themselves to make the playoff. Obviously, we're talking about the playoff when we the number one focus should at least be let's just try and get to the ACC championship game. But in the expanded playoff, strength of schedule and strength of record is going to be some of the biggest metrics that people are going to be looking at. But if you can get, I'm assuming Western Carolina, Louisiana Tech, and Northern Illinois are likely wins, and if you can get one out of the two between Tennessee and Clemson, then you got the back half of the schedule looking pretty optimistic for you, and you got Wake Forest at home. You don't have to go to Winston-Salem next year.
Yeah,
so
and I think one of the big things too that's very helpful is if you look at the last 2 weeks of the year, that Georgia Tech game, which Georgia Tech is a team people are high on right now for next year, them and Virginia Tech. If you look at that Georgia Tech game on a Thursday, so we get an extra day to prepare for the trip to Chapel Hill the next week, and North Carolina has to go to Boston College on that Saturday. So we'll get a little extra time for that game.
Yeah, and
what was that?
Go ahead, Alec.
I said the Georgia Tech game scares me a little bit, though.
Yeah, that game does. It's them and Virginia Tech are two teams that people are really high on for next year. And that kind of goes into my next point, is it kind of feels like for the first time in a long time, there isn't really a clear-cut favorite in the ACC. I know Florida State's going to be good. I know Clemson's going to be good. People are going to talk about Miami, and we're going to get some talk a little bit too. And obviously Syracuse has done well in the portal a little bit. But, it kind of feels like there really isn't a clear-cut favorite. Do you guys feel the same way?
No, and Florida State's schedule is not that favorable. I mean, they also have to play Georgia Tech, and
in a foreign country.
Yeah. And they have to go to SMU. They're playing Clemson and Duke and Miami and Carolina in back-to-back weeks, and then followed by Notre Dame. So it's not going to be the easiest stretch for them, and I think of the draws that State could hope for, it's one of the best, especially since in the last 6 weeks of the season, there's 2 open dates. So if they're dealing with injuries down the stretch, which knock on wood they don't, but they had really good injury luck this year, and I'm worried that that as the pendulum swings, it might come back in the opposite direction. That really gives a good opportunity to rest up down the stretch.
Yeah, and I was trying to figure out why SMU had 3 open weeks, and I found out that they are still trying to schedule their final non-conference game. But for people that are curious why NC State has 2 bye weeks this year instead of 1, it's just the way the calendar worked out. because the Labor Day weekend is earlier, Thanksgiving is later, so they get an extra bye week in there. And I think that's going to be the case in 25 as well, and maybe 26, I think. I know 25 for sure will be that way.
It's weird.
I mean, it
But,
seems like almost because I'm looking at the overall schedule, it seems like pretty much every ACC team gets 2 open dates across
every
the
team in
board,
the country should have bye weeks. Every team in the
but
country should have.
Georgia Tech has 3. And they have
It's because
one
they
right
play
before.
in week 0. Yeah, it's because they play in week 0.
Yeah. Yeah, Florida State has 3
But
as well. Yep.
yeah, and SMU has 3 because they only have 3 non-conference opponents, and they're working on which. Why even release the schedule if it's not done yet?
Yeah, it's going to be
Why
so
even
weird to see SMU at Stanford on the ACC network. That's going to be classic ACC rivalry.
at like 11:30 at night too? Like, I feel bad for like those for like the ACC team, which I think they're going to have a new color guy. I think because Tim Hasselbeck took a coaching job, but Wes Durham and whoever's with him going to Stanford to call a game instead of just driving up the road to Georgia Tech.
I'm ready for SMU to sneak up on a lot of people next year.
They're going to be a very surprising team.
So
Mm-hmm.
they have their oil barons for their alumni have been very vocal about how they are going to fund the difference because they're choosing to not take the full revenue share just to get into their foot in the door in the conference because they feel like this is their opportunity to get back in on the major sports stage, and they have basically vowed that whatever the shortfall is in the funding gap, they are going to personally uh, fill in that hole. So it's going to be, and they're going to be competing for top NIL dollars, especially within Texas. Probably poaching from some of their in-state rivals. It's going to be interesting to see. I'm glad the state isn't playing them this year, honestly.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's telling too because they won the American, they beat Tulane, they have a highly touted quarterback who has had every chance to enter the transfer portal and go somewhere quote unquote better and hasn't. He's stuck around. And, I think they play 2 Big 12 teams also in their non-conference schedule. They play BYU and SMU, and those will be telling games to see just how good they act. I mean, TCU, sorry.
Yeah, TCU.
BYU and TCU. I was thinking of TCU. Yeah, another spring game. BYU and TCU. So that'll be telling to see how good SMU will be when they play those two. Obviously, those aren't going to be Big 12 championship teams by any stretch, but
that's an underrated in-state Texas rivalry, SMU TCU.
And it's going away, and I hate that.
Yeah,
it's going away after 25, and I hate that.
Mm-hmm.
But also, correct me if I'm wrong. I thought they changed our designated opponents from Duke UNC Clemson to Duke UNC Wake. Am I wrong on that?
That's true. No, you're right. Thank you for that correction. Yeah, I should remember that.
Yeah, we won't play Clemson for the year.
All the in-state teams are mostly playing each other, with the exception of Carolina is going to play Virginia every year. They have a long-standing rivalry with them.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, that's better for state in the long run, I guess. With ease of racking up wins, but maybe not the likelihood of quality wins. We'll see what happens with Manny Diaz coming into Duke.
And I know that people will look at that schedule and say that it's not a great home schedule, but at the same time, I think it's a good opportunity for you to see them win.
Yeah,
I think most importantly, I mean, you play a de facto home game in Charlotte against Tennessee. You have Louisiana Tech at home, NIU at home, Western Carolina at home. I think, barring something unbelievably unforeseen, it's early, of course, but those are likely to be games where they'll be favored pretty heavily. Wake Forest, I don't know how good Wake's going to be this year. Syracuse will be a tough home game. Duke will be a tough home game. Stanford, they're making the trip all the way across the country. I don't know how tough that game will be, but we'll see. So while you get to see Wakes and you get to see the Dukes, you get to see some new teams also. I don't think NIU's ever played NC State. I don't think Stanford's ever played NC State. So at least hasn't in a long time. So it's going to be some new opponents. But the reason why I bring that up is because 2025's non-conference schedule and 2026's non-conference schedule. 2025, if you like playing NC teams, I got news for you. They play ECU, App State, and Campbell, and they play UNC, Duke, and Wake. And
Wow.
Notre Dame is another non-conference game.
I hate that.
Yeah, 2025 is going to be stressful.
I don't know if I'll be alive.
Yeah, you got to go to App, number one.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
Nothing to gain and everything to lose.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then they go to Notre Dame.
That's what Mac Brown said. He was like, why are we playing them?
Mm-hmm. Well, and UNC is doing a home and home with Charlotte, with 49ers that starts next year.
Yeah,
so
they suck, though. I mean,
yeah.
I think they got a good coach. I think they really have a coach that's going to turn them around, I think. They've done really well in the portal, too, so that's a team to watch.
But I looking at the early part of the schedule, that Tennessee game is really interesting because I know they have been very heavy in the transfer portal. So their offense is looking to reload, and it seems like that's not going to be, that obviously we knew it was going to be a hard matchup, even with the roster they had last year, but I think they're going to be an even tougher matchup, and I think it'll be a good early season test, like you were saying, Alec. The one thing that I like is that State gets 10 days to prepare for it, because they have that Thursday night matchup and then a full week with the weekend to get ready.
Well, Tennessee also, I think, is going to play on a Thursday that week too, I think. Let me double check that. I know they've done it before where they've played their FCS team on a Thursday night to start the year, and no, they scheduled to play on Saturday. My apologies. So they won't have the full. They won't have an extra day or two to prepare. So, but
yeah, overall, it's like this is the time.
This is the year.
It's got to be it. You got to push the chips into the table. If you can't take advantage of this schedule and at least make it to Charlotte, then I don't know. If the stars are going to align for you as well as they will this year.
Yeah, well, I feel bad for the Bank of America Stadium scorekeeper. He's gonna have some hurt hands after that Tennessee game.
I think State's a lock to play in Charlotte this year in week 2.
Let's save that clip.
I agree with Essad though. I think that this is a big opportunity with the schedule that we have for NC State. We don't play Florida State. We don't play Louisville. We don't play Miami. I don't think only one of those three, I think, is making it to Charlotte anyway. So, big opportunity. At worst, 7-1 in the ACC probably gets you there. At worst, I would feel like.
Yeah, you definitely don't have to run the table. I think that there's enough opportunity for the other teams to trip up at least once, maybe twice. So you can go 10-2 and make it there. I don't. There's no juggernaut like Florida State is not going to be the same as they were this year. They're not going to just like steamroll through everyone and make it all the way there undefeated. So there's room for error within the schedule, and you don't even have to go 10-2. You just need to drop no more than 2 games in the conference. So you can lose to Tennessee, and ultimately, like that game doesn't hurt you in the long run. Would it be great to win that and then compete to get into the playoff? Yeah, that'd be great. But I'm not as concerned about that as I am about getting an ACC title.
Yeah, and I know that Georgia Tech is probably the trickiest road game we have, just because pretty good chance. Fingers crossed, we're in a situation where we absolutely have to win that game to go to Charlotte to punch our ticket or whatever. But the game that I want to circle, that I think is the one that is the most worrisome for me, is the game on October 19th at Cal, because it will be the last time State went out to play out west. They ended up not playing. So, they haven't been out west a lot other than for bowl games. That's going to be an interesting one to see what the team's mojo is like for that one.
Yeah, I wonder how far in advance of the game they're gonna get to travel. Because like I went East Coast to West Coast this summer, and it took me like a solid like day and a half to recover just from the flight. So I mean, it's worse going west to east, but so those West Coast teams coming out here to the East Coast, it's going to be tough for them. But hopefully they can get out there at least more than 48 hours at a time. I don't know if anybody will be there though. Cal is
Yeah. Cal certainly is good at the non-revenues, but when it comes to the big revenue sports, they've not been what they should be for a school of their stature. So, but I just worry about that game because obviously, like I said, going out there, you got your bye week after it, and you will have just played 6 games in a row, I believe, to start the season, with 4 of them at home. So you haven't traveled a whole lot, and the ones that you have traveled, you've either been on a bus or you're basically taking a bus to the 2 games, Tennessee and Clemson. So you haven't been on a long trip.
That's week 8 actually.
Oh, so it's
eight games in a row.
Yeah, so 8 games in a row. Raleigh, Charlotte, Raleigh, Clemson, Raleigh, Berkeley. So that would be their first long trip. So I think that's concerning for sure.
So what is it about Syracuse you think is a tough matchup? What do they have going on?
They've done okay in the portal, and I'm still confused as to why Cal McCord went there unless he wants to be a broadcaster because they're the #1 broadcasting school in the country. But I'm still kind of confused by that, but they look really sneaky, and I know that there's been people in college football media that have been high on Virginia Tech and Georgia Tech too, like I said, and obviously we don't play Virginia Tech, but it just feels like a game where if State doesn't bring their A game, Syracuse is going to hang around.
I'm still laughing at Philip Danford calling him Honda McCord. I will never look at him the same way again.
Yeah, Honda McCord. Yeah, that was a good one. Yeah. Well, I think we should get to our question of the day today, and it's not as actually one more thing. I do want to mention one more thing for Alec here. NC State does not have to play Sam Hartman anymore.
Hey, that's a shame.
We can still talk about him.
That's a shame. That we're facing such an upgraded quarterback from opponents this year. My guy Sam.
Question of the day today is a little bit more simpler. I don't think we'll get into a big debate over this one like we have with the Pop-Tarts, but question of the day today is, what is your least favorite chore? I guess we just couldn't think of questions this week, so that's the one we picked.
For me, it honestly hasn't been as big of an issue the last couple of years since it hasn't snowed as much up here in New Jersey as it has when I first moved up here over a decade ago. But I cannot stand shoveling snow. It's just one of the most menial tasks, and I've gotten big snowstorms, and I'm too stubborn to buy a snowblower, and I want to shovel it myself. And even though my better half is convinced that I'm just doing it just to put my foot in the ground, just to show how tough I am. But taking like half a day to shovel 2.5 feet of snow is no fun, and you're just like out there and you're hot and sweaty and cold at the same time, and it's just like one of those things where it just feels like it never ends sometimes.
Do you know what you use to shovel snow with in central North Carolina? Windshield wipers.
I was gonna say maybe a leaf blower.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, if I can go next, kind of piggyback off of that, I do want to preface this with, it is currently, as we're recording this, January 31st. I'm in the Twin Cities of Minnesota somewhere. I'm not going to say specifically where, but I'm in the Twin Cities, and it was 58 degrees today.
Nice.
in Minnesota, it was 58 degrees the high. So that was an all-time record. It's never been set before. So there's no snow on the ground, which kind of negates my least favorite chore, but mine is getting the snow off of your car. That one is really not fun, especially when you have to be in a hurry and you have to get to work. And and then you get the snow off, but then you can't get the ice off, and it's like, come on. So, but I haven't had to worry about that this winter, so that's been fun. I'm okay with that.
And you people in your snow. I don't think I've seen snow that needed to be shoveled in maybe since I was 2.
Yeah,
A long
Blizzard of
time.
2000.
Yeah, I think Raleigh has like one snowplow, and I don't think it's had gas in it for like 5 years. They probably like forgot it's in there. They're gonna open the garage one day and they're like, "What in the world is that thing?" Mine is cleaning the sink. This is a sneaky, disgusting chore. Like this is one. Like everyone thinks the nastiest thing you could clean is the bathroom. It's not. It's the sink. The sink is disgusting. I don't like touching wet food. That's really disgusting to me. So anytime that's going on, that is a really that and cleaning the shower drain is extraordinarily disgusting. Anytime you have to like touch something that's mushy that's not supposed to be mushy, is like gonna top my list. That is like I have like a visceral reaction to that. Like it's just gross. So, yeah, probably that one for me. I also hated more than anything. Something I had to do a bunch when I was like in grade school was picking up twigs and sticks out of the garden. That was like my parents' favorite thing to like make me do, and it was awful. I hated it. Okay, well, there's so many sticks. Like, how you can always find more sticks. Like, you're not just like there's always gonna be more. I mean, they're little twigs in the dirt. Like, there were so many of them. It was
they were just trying to keep you busy.
Yeah. Well, Alec mentioned how they only have one snowplow in North Carolina. There's a fun annual tradition up here where they do a snowplow naming contest for the new snowplows they get every year. And this year's winner was Taylor Drift.
Oh, that's good.
I like that one.
Taylor Drift. Clark Bliswald, Beyond Slay, Dolly Plowton, You're Killing Me Squalls. Those are the other winners, along with
Trey Plower.
Trey Plower. I don't know about that, but
right off the top, I like that. Oh,
well, this got NS quickly, didn't it?
I will say I have been try to be a defender of North Carolina. A lot of people try to make fun of how people in the South can't handle snow, and anytime people up north try to say that, I'll say, okay, you try and go live in North Carolina in July and August when it's like 99 degrees, 99% humidity, and you will melt immediately. So
I remember one year we had a family beach trip to the Outer Banks, and it was like 95 degrees with like 100% humidity. It was brutal. I don't remember what year it was, but it was brutal.
Yeah, you can't have your car's air conditioning go out in North Carolina like you can up north. And yeah, that happened to me one summer, and I tried not to fix it, and I ended up doing a 5-hour drive in July without air conditioning, and that was kind of like the worst decision I ever made. So you get some pluses and some minuses with the weather. I will say I don't think people in the north are as good at driving in the snow as they think they are, because the streets are usually plowed all the time. You don't really. So yeah, that's kind of my take on that. But anyway,
they don't have to get as much experience driving actually in the conditions they think they are, just because the snow is on the side of the road. It's not actually on the road itself.
Right. We're really good at driving in salt.
It's just really funny to hear them say in North Carolina, it's like, when we get an inch of snow and they're like, stay off the roads. And then here, where I'm at in Minnesota, an inch of snow is just your average Tuesday in the wintertime. So it's for some reason, but
it's a panic attack in North Carolina if there's even the thought of snow. One time in high school, they canceled school because of snow, and it didn't snow. It literally never snowed at all. There wasn't a single flake of snow.
There's one year we were in fourth grade, and I'm sure there are a lot of people who might remember this one. When Alec was in third grade, I was in fourth grade, and there was not snow in the forecast that day, and we got hit with a big phantom snowstorm, and the school buses couldn't get to the schools to pick up the kids, and so there were people that ended up spending the night at school, and
Wow.
that one was a big disaster. I remember that one, and I'm sure a lot of people remember that.
Big ice storm was that 2002, 2003,
2002 or 2003 or 4, yeah.
Yeah, there was like 24 inches of snow in North Carolina, which I think is more
Oh,
than
I was thinking of 2000. Yeah,
That was 2000,
yeah, yeah.
was
That
the
was
2000.
Yeah.
That one, I don't think we'll ever have that again.
Do you guys remember that time that Emeka Mezi caught 2 touchdowns in 26 seconds
Yeah,
to beat UNC after trailing by 9 with less than 2 minutes to go?
I remember that. I was
Yeah,
kinda hoping that the Detroit Lions would do that on Sunday, but they needed Emeka Mezi and they didn't have him. So
Yeah, you need Emeka Mezi to do that. It's something a lot of teams overlook because you can't
Right.
do that without him.
yes, almost forgot before we go. Alec has been working on something for Trinity Road Times. We have something new we want to share with you. So go right ahead, Alec.
Yes, more street themed things that you can use. We now have the Trinity Lot on the website, which is a forum for talking about all things NC State related. There are currently just launched tonight. We currently have 2 test posts. One of them is, of course, about Emeka Mezi, but you should jump on there, check it out. We got lots of space for lots of different discussions. We have a general board. We have a football specific board called Football, and we have a basketball specific board that's called Kevin and Wes's Fun Adventures. And this is we hope to make this a community where people can talk about NC State without being flooded by all the other crap that you run into on Twitter and any other weird stuff that is happening at the places that you are currently at, whatever that may be. I'm really rambling right now. But anyway, you should really go to that thing and put some stuff in there. Yeah.
And
And I want it to be known that I vouched for it to be called the TX Lot. Long live the TX Lot off of Trinity Road. It no longer exists. It's where the apartments are now. But should have gone with that name. But Alec's in charge, so he's the one that decided. So.
And good vibes are preferred. Trying to be good to make this a more positive space than most of the other corners of the internet.
But yeah, don't be insane. That's like the only rule for the board is just don't be insane.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm excited about that, and we're excited to have hopefully a very positive week of women's basketball to talk about next week on the Lotcast. I know Pac-9 is starting up soon as well, so there's a lot of excitement in the air for that and what Elliot Avent and his squad might have in store this year. So, and we'll of course talk about men's basketball and anything else going on in the world of NC State athletics as well. But that's going to wrap up this edition of the Lotcast. Thanks for listening. Go join our forum and go Pack.
Pack.